We have been discussing how truth shapes our society and how it is woven into our governance, woven into our laws, woven into our spiritual foundations. Truth defines who we are and how we are perceived. But there are those that have built their empires upon lies. Falsehoods that are meant to create an environment of deception as they make demands for obedience or our submission. And those who support them are lost in this web of falsehoods that have been created, and they find themselves misdirected and confused. And to some, the truth is whatever's told to them. They believe and follow these lies without question, no matter how ridiculous or damning the lie is. And the cost is now being seen and felt as people have started to regret their vote, their support, and their loyalty. They're beginning to question their lives, their direction, their meaning. And this is the cause and effect of lies and falsehoods. My name is Reverend Michael, and this is the Open Road Ministry. Recently, we have discussed the 4 pillars of manipulation, and we talked about the woke dilemma. But today we're going to take a few steps backwards, because I want to talk about the harmful impact of hateful speech. Harmful speech does not need to be grand. It could just be a little fib or a claim of stealing elections, or it could be calling someone a racist because they don't agree with your immigration policy. But there are always consequences. Deception now encapsulates our environment, filled with words like fake news and propaganda, woke, and recently liar. It's trying to establish 2 sets of stories. Ours versus theirs. Our truth versus their truth. Reality versus what they perceive to be true. And there's no longer a middle ground. The lies, no matter on which side you fall, show that the perspective is positive to that group, regardless of how negative that voice or how destructive that lie might be. The group finds it as a positive message, a rally call. Institutions, groups, and people are spreading information that is designed to control our society and our political narratives. This manipulation is generating social division and fear, meant to strip away personal freedoms, to consolidate power, to transfer wealth. And this is all happening, taken away from the poor and given to the wealthy. Using the available technologies that they have, such as Grok or Chat GTP, or what Palantir is producing, these individuals are assuming control of our social media feeds, of our information, of the narratives, causing a loss in trust, a loss in compassion, a loss in empathy, and a loss in the desire to fight for what is right, to fight for our freedoms. And there is a huge psychological impact to this whole situation, this transformation that our society is currently experiencing. Deception triggers anxiety, depression, and a trauma response. Fear and hate are generated, social networks are being degraded, and people are left alone to fight for their own basic rights like healthcare and food. Consistently bombarded with these repeated lies, fear and mistrust starts to divide families, It starts to divide communities. Communities segregate over political ideologies, and even trust in one's neighbor becomes eroded. And we have to ask, who do we trust? Today I was called a racist because I disagree with someone's immigration policies, their immigration views. And they started quoting scripture, reaching and grabbing and taking things out of context in order to support the narrative they've been fed. And what we're finding is this sort of behavior is beginning to tear away at the foundations of relationships. I mean, I'm not just talking romantic partners, but also families. They're being weakened by these narratives. These political ideologies and hateful rhetoric are an indication of the moral values that are isolating individuals, enhancing an already problematic loneliness epidemic that followed the COVID pandemic. The lies we hear now are told to justify the removal of earned benefits, entitlements, and social safety nets. They're meant to support, the programs that are meant to support the vulnerable, the sick, the elderly, and other groups. The sad part is here recently in my community, we saw ICE raid these plants, and it was obvious that it's directed by racism, and the force they use is meant to create fear and anxiety. People are being sent to concentration camps. Yes, concentration camps. Actions all based upon lies and falsehoods in order to present strength. But the true intent is to consolidate power and create a mechanism for control and, again, submission. Many find themselves being segregated from their families, segregated from their co-workers. They find themselves alone, unable to get help when they're needed, both medically, financially, emotionally, judiciously. They find themselves, like during COVID, facing questions such as, how do I pay my rent this month? And what do I do if I get sick? And how do I get my medication? And they're finding that there is no one there to offer help. There's only threats or silence. Our nation is in economic hardship. This economic hardship is abundant now. Migrants are fleeing the fields, and the tariffs are being used to tax the U.S. citizen. Eggs are higher, gas is higher, food is higher. People are losing their jobs because of these lies. And there are people that are justifying that loss based upon the lies they're being told. Lies that are meant to assume total control over the people, authoritarian control of the people, of the nation, and of the wealth. We're faced with constant exposure to manipulation and dishonesty by these groups of individuals that are hiding their own personal crimes while causing others to question their own reality. And as a result, we're seeing these growing verbal attacks. We're seeing growing physical violence and an unlawful military presence, all initiated by words that are meant to demean a specific group. The verbal attacks, the physical violence, the military presence, they're all initiated by these falsehoods that are meant to demean, to hurt, to ostracize, and it's harming the mental balance of the people and of our communities and of our nation. And even the childish references and name-calling that we hear every day, even the childish references and name-calling we hear that we have come to expect are leading to emotional instability and social withdrawal, and on a few occasions has even resulted in violence against minority groups. And we see words repeated, words that trap people in this thing called groupthink that we've discussed before. The repeated words, the slogans, and the gaslighting leads to actual physical harm, and people reach their limits and take action into their own hands. You see, words are powerful. They help build or create an environment of shame and guilt and low self-esteem. Hurtful language, especially when repeated over and over and over again, causes people to internalize that insult and start to believe that insult. Over time, the victims begin to believe the lie themselves. Maybe I am worthless. Maybe it is my fault. And this erodes individual self-worth. It makes it harder for individuals to stand up for themselves and to trust one another. And this further divides our society and our families. It is the way that bullies control their targets. It is the way that bullies, silence their victims. And the more successful these bullies are, the more they bully. And it is a form of emotional abuse, period. And that's not the color, it's psychologists. You can also look at the DSM, and you will find this type of behavior is emotionally abusive. They include, words like, you are nothing, you're always wrong, no one will ever love you. They are not just cruel. Again, they're abusive. Yelling and name-calling and belittling are all forms of emotional violence. And over time, emotional abuse starts to reprogram how someone sees themselves, sees the people around them. It shrinks their spirit and it starts to silence their voice. And then we have two different types of responses. We have the fight or flight. And hence we have an increase in violence. Or we have an increase in social isolation. And we see with our current leader and his supporters, they use this tactic to bully, to manipulate, and abuse those who do not agree with them. And this has damaged relationships and personal reputation. Lies destroy trust, and without trust, relationships start to unravel. In families, dishonesty can lead to generational trauma. And the abuse causes members of the family to cut ties with one another, to stop speaking kindly about one another, and often causing permanent harm, resulting in separation, divorce, and sometimes even physical responses, physical reprisals. And in the professional settings, it erodes teamwork, it erodes morale, it erodes respect. And in the military, it erodes unit readiness, which affects national security. Even casual relationships fracture. When the words are used to humiliate, to gaslight, to manipulate, it results in ghosting. No matter how it occurs, though, there are long-term consequences to what we are seeing. The effects of verbal abuse can linger on long after the words are spoken, and many survivors carry the emotional scars for years. It is common for victims to require therapy or spiritual guidance in order to heal from this emotional abuse. Repeated exposure to the hurtful language, especially in youth, is linked to adult depression, PTSD, unhealthy coping mechanisms. And it is not uncommon for those who bully to double down and use the victim's mental health as a means to further their actions, to continue their bullying, to strengthen their position. Because words don't leave physical bruises, their damage is also dismissed or denied, and the abusers often say things like, "You're too sensitive. I was only joking. you took it out of context. Or what I heard too often, stop being gay. Right? During my time in the military and after I was blown up, after I was shot and stabbed, I was told to stop being a pussy. Be a man, grow up, show some balls. From my leaders, the ones who sent me in harm's way. Statements like this were meant to make me feel guilty for being hurt. But that's the cost of combat, right? It was meant to make me feel weak and to silence me from complaining against the actions. As a great example of victim blaming and shaming, otherwise, it's emotional abuse. But, such actions, such minimalization, such name calling, this emotional abuse teaches people to ignore their pain, to accept mistreatment, and to stay silent. When we were kids, what was that statement we often heard? Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words can bury a soul. Lies, insults, and emotional manipulation do not fade with an echo, but they settle in the mind and shape the way we see ourselves, others, and the world around us. So never underestimate the power of what is said or what is denied. Lies are so devastating that our great teachers included verses meant to teach us how to avoid such traps. I refer to Buddha a lot. And the Buddha teaches us about right speech and harmful words. Right speech, or the Noble Eightfold Path, emphasizes the moral and spiritual discipline of avoiding harsh and false and divisive speech. The Buddha says, speak only the speech that neither torments self nor does harm to others. That speech is truly well spoken. Words have the power to both destroy and heal. When words are both true and kind, they can change a world. And this is the karma of words. It reminds us that words, like our actions, they all leave a karmic footprint. And even in the Old and New Testaments, we find very similar teachings. Like in Proverbs, for instance, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. And this shows us that speech has consequences, both destructive and life-giving. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. This emphasizes edification and truth, not just avoidance of falsehood. I can even open the Torah and find in Leviticus, not to go about spreading slander among your people, which states, do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. It is a direct call to avoid gossip, to avoid harmful speech within our community. The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. And this reinforces the spiritual weight of speech and reflects the damage that could be caused by harsh words. All of our sacred texts speak the truth this way. And even in the Quran, we have similar messaging. In Surah, for instance, we have this one verse, "O you who have believed, let not a people ridicule other people, nor defame one another. nor insult one another by nicknames, and do not spy or backbite one another. This is a powerful condemnation of verbal harm, slander, and of ridicule. Again, every faith warns us that words can heal, and words also have the power to destroy. A false word can fracture a soul, and a cruel phrase can shape an individual's life. Our sacred texts all agree that truth matters, and how we speak is a reflection of who we are as individuals and as a society. My name is Reverend Michael, and this is the Open Road Ministry, and I want to thank you for joining me today, and I hope this message spoke to you, and I hope that it earned your subscription. Please help support this channel by clicking the like button, the subscribe button, and sharing it with your friends. And if you would like to help support our other mission of helping disabled veterans, there is a donation link below, a brief description of the services we provide. Until then, may today you walk in peace and honesty.